Hi, this is Bert de Vries. This is the Bayesian Machine Learning and Information Processing class. And today we're going to be talking about intelligent systems, intelligent agents, and active inference. Let me just start with a picture to show you what we mean by an agent. So here is an example. Um, Here I have an agent. You can see that as our machine learning system. This is the system that we want to design. And the agent can do machine learning as we've done before. It can take in observations from the world. These observations could be, in this case, the position and maybe the velocity of a cart, of a robot here. But it's more than just a machine learning box. The agent also can make actions onto the world. For instance, it can send forces to the wheels, and thereby it can propel the robot forward. And by giving different forces in different ways to the wheels, I can actually steer. So um, I can move that robot about, and crucially, thereby I can affect the observations that I, as an agent, or the agent is going to sense in the future. So the agent, and this is crucial, has by making actions, can affect its own data set, right? And this is in a real-time system, a real-time loop. Make actions that changes the observations that I make, which changes my perception of the world because it changes the position or the velocity of the cart. That changes my actions, which changes the position, which changes my observation, changes my perception, which is my estimation of the position, which changes, and so forth. So in this real-time loop, I am getting observations that I cannot get in any other way. It's really, I am affecting the world, and the world affects me as an agent. So there's something going on here that you can't do in an offline fashion. That's very important. Um, Now, where does the agent, how does it know what actions to make? Well, there is an internal belief about what the agent wants to observe in the future, namely a target position or a target velocity or something. The agent must have some beliefs. Um, the classical approach to solving this control problem for the agent is what's called reinforcement learning. Um, Basically, you assume that next to the position of the cart and the velocity, you also get once in a while a signal, for instance, from an external observer that says things are going well or things are not going well. And from those clues, those rewards, you want to infer your actions, or you want to come up with actions. In reinforcement learning, we work with reward functions, and we work with functions that map internal states to actions. And it's a beautiful theory, but there are also some limitations to that theory. And those limitations are pointed out by Friston in a little video. And so here, where we talk about, it says Carl Friston and the free energy principle. So the second bullet says, have a look at Professor Friston's video segment on the cost function for intelligent behavior. I would really like you to watch that video, because he talks about the two ways of control and what that cost function will look like. Alternatively to an explicit cost function, so the reinforcement learning approach, is what Carl Friston calls the free energy principle. And the free energy principle claims that all biological self-organizing processes, including brain processes, can be described as free energy minimization processes in a probabilistic model. So that is really a really big step. What he says here is that everything that the brain does, so our perception, cognition, our control signals, movements, attention mechanisms, recall, structural learning, everything is just free energy minimization. And it's the free energy minimization that we have talked about in the previous class. It's variational free energy minimization. It's approximate Bayesian inference. That's what the brain does. Um, there is another thread to this story that we're not going to go into, but you can also show that free energy minimization over time relates to something that in physics is called action or minimizing action. And the free energy principle is an instance of what's called the principle of least action in physics. And the principle of least action, which is associated with names such as Hamilton and Lagrange and Maupertuis. This is a very fundamental principle. You can derive Newton's laws, but also the electrodynamics and quantum mechanics. It all relates very much to the principle of least action, which for our purposes means that, and this is what Friston says, on the one hand, the brain follows the laws of physics. How could it be different, right? On the other hand, following the laws of physics leads to free energy minimization, which leads to approximate Bayesian reasoning. So, and that's a very interesting claim. Just doing physics actually leads to approximate Bayesian reasoning. So, I'm not a physicist nor a neuroscientist. I'm an electrical engineer. So I will not talk about whether I think he is completely right or not, but I think it is, I've read the papers by Carl Friston, or at least some of them, and they're notoriously difficult, so reading all the papers would be quite some work, but I think it's a very beautiful theory, and it's really an inspiration for us engineers to take this now to engineering and try to design intelligent systems or intelligent agents following this free energy principle. That is interesting for engineers because it would mean that signal processing and machine learning and also steering of cars and are all in principle emerging results from free energy minimization. So in this class, we'll talk a little bit about how would these agents look inside, and we're just touching the surface. We're not going to go in depth. I just want in this class to make the relationship between what we've talked before, probabilistic reasoning, Bayesian models, variational Bayes, and intelligent systems. We're going to have at the end of this class a bonus lecture by Magnus. Magnus is a teaching assistant, but he's also a neuroscientist, and he will relate what we do more to biology and neuroscience. The issue is if we want to achieve this, if we want to come up with an agent that makes actions to, let's say, fulfill some kind of a purpose with those actions, parking somewhere or getting to a particular location, then what goes inside this agent? And this question has been answered before, already about 50 years ago in this paper. 1970, every good regulator of a system must be a model of that system. A good controller for future observations must make a model for those observations. So in this paper, it already says that the theory has an interesting corollary, that the living brain, insofar as it is successful and efficient as a regulator, a controller for survival, it must proceed by the formation of a model or models of its environment. So that's what this paper says is that brains are not systems that just take in sensory inputs, do some processing features, and then decide on, okay, what did I just see? Object recognition. But brains have generative models for observations. So brains actually try to predict sensory inputs, and then based on the actual observations, it tries to infer what the real, let's say, the state of the world, that the causes that gave rise to the observations. Let me try to put that in a figure. So here is the idea that goes into an intelligent agent according to this this paper, this good regulator theorem, and also according to Carl Friston. Here's the world. We can make actions onto the world, and there's some internal dynamics. There's internal states as tilde, and the world gives rise to observations. Now here's my agent. Inside this agent, I have a model that goes into the direction of into this direction, generative direction. So I have priors over actions, over control signals. I call them here mu, or sorry, u. These priors over controls, and controls give rise through internal states. These are my estimated states of the world, and that gives rise through a likelihood function or data generating function to observations. So I'm trying to predict here observations. Then I'm getting in real observation, and I infer through, basically in this direction, I infer Q over S and Q over U. So I try to go with posteriors over S and over U. Posterior over S is basically an estimate of the state of the world. That's my perception of the world. The posterior over U is my beliefs over actions, really, and I take the maximum or a sample, and that's the action I apply, and we keep going around. So inference goes in this direction, but generation goes in this direction. All right. Next to this black model trying to predict observations, I also have to have some notion of, well, where do we actually want to go with these actions, right? I mean, I can predict the world where it goes because I have an internal model now, but I actually, if I want to have goal-directed behavior, I want to have a representation for what I do want to observe in the future. And so this agent also has in his model a prior on future observations. You can't see it here yet, but I'll draw this out over time, this graph, in a minute. And that will allow us to make actions that will fulfill, basically, our expectations of where we want to end up in the future. Crucially, the whole thing inside is just one big model that contains modules that really try, let's say, to predict where the world goes, and it has also models of where we want to be. But altogether, it is just one big model, and altogether the agent will just do free energy minimization in this model, which leads to posteriors for internal variables as perception of the world, what's going on in the world, and U controls, future controls or future actions. In this graph, I have actions A. These are variables that live in the outside world. My beliefs about future actions, I'm going to write here U. And in the same way, I have let's say, observations really in the world that are why, but what really gets, let's say, gets into my sensors, I call that, that is represented inside the agent, I call that X. Now, if I write this out in time, you get a graph that looks more like this. At a particular time, let's say t, I am here, so I'm here in time. That means I've just made an observation x of t, and that observation came from my world, and that the dynamics of this world was affected by my action that I drew from u of t. Everything in here, in this box here, is my agent. That's my model of the world. I can, S of t is my estimation, my state, that represents basically the state of the world here. So S gives rise through a data generating mechanism, through observations. And I can run that model forward in time now. I can run it through t plus 1, 3 plus t, and I have priors over future actions that I can make. Now, crucially, the future hasn't happened yet. So here, I don't have black boxes, little black boxes, because they are not yet observed. But I do write here these white filled, but red boxes or red nodes, which are beliefs, probability distributions about future observations. For instance, when I drive through a corner with my car, I have an internal belief that in the future I will keep the car on the road, and right, that sets up a certain probability distribution of what kind of observations are desired and not desired. If I ride my bike, then I want to keep upright. So I have a very low probability that in the future I will observe that my foot is on the ground. I will have a higher probability that my foot is off the ground. That's sort of how that works. And these priors about future observations, they are set by other sub-agents in your brain, because you have lots of different objectives in life, right? But crucially, at this point, I make just my observation x of t, and I'm interested now in my new action, right? Because I'm in this action perception loop. So what we do is, once I get this, I'm doing basically inference inside this box, and that means I'm gonna just pass this message up and combine it with with basically my model of the world, and get here my S of t, which is my estimated state of the world, and I can pass that message up here. But I also get messages from the future, from the imagined future, and that incorporates where I want to end up. So I'm going to get a message here backwards also, and that goes up here as well. What this is if I want to cross a street, and there's cars driving, and I want to decide I'm going to cross or not. So what I do is I'll run my model of the world forward and see if I cross the street, if the car is going to hit me. If it hits me, then I want to end up with a posterior here that I stay, right? And I'm going to set as priors here that I'm not going to get hit. So the free energy is minimized when I come up here with actions that will fulfill that actually leads to predictions that are that match my desired my goals. So that's sort of how that works. So then I get a posterior here, and I make a new action and get a new observation here, and continues. You can do this in basically You can show this on how this moves online, right? So you get here your you just get here your observation. What you then do is you do inference. In this box you get information from all your observations, but also from the imagined future with with priors on future observations. That leads to new, let's say, posterior over control variables. And I need to move this thing forward in time because time moves on. Everything in this box, all the observations have already taken place. I'm just going to close the box around it and replace that with a little box here. This is now a prior for S of t. I'm going to extend my model here. I'm just going to use my existing model of the world to extend it by one time step. And I'm going to set a new prior for a future observation there. And now this graph is basically the same as this graph. At least the same, it has the same length again. And I will just sample from here now, from this posterior, move it to the outside, we'll get a new observation, and then I'm exactly in this graph here. So that's sort of how you move forward in these graphs. You keep imagining the future, you have prior beliefs about future observations, but internally, this is still just one big probabilistic model, and all we do is do inference for the hidden states. That leads to perception, knowledge about the states of the world, and also posteriors over future controls. That leads to actions. And so I just move forward in this way, and that takes care of things if things go really well. And we can try to program this. So we did that for this card park problem. This was a project by a master student, and so we did this in Fornilab. So we set up a model here, we run it forward in time, and we do inference, we make a sum product algorithm, and then we basically execute, and here you get the position as a function of time, and as a target position we set 0. So you see how the controls actually lead to basically to where we want to go. And you can there's also a video of this, you can interfere in that process. So here's that card, and once it parked at a particular place, you can interfere, you can point it in a different direction, but there's still free energy as long as it isn't in its final target position. So it will quickly bounce back and return to its original orientation. Yeah, that's sort of how that works. Of course, there's a lot more to say about intelligent agents. What I wanted to convey is that you can create agents that learn about the world, that select steering signals, movements. There's exhibit all kinds of intelligent behavior within this probabilistic Bayesian framework, within the framework of creating a model and just do free energy minimization. The only thing that you need to do in order to make it, let's say, purposeful is to extend your model to the future and set some prior distributions on future observations. Aside from that, it's the same recipe as everything we've done before. And you can make choices whether you go with discrete variables or continuously valued variables. That's all like what we've done before. I want to leave it here. I want to ask you to read these notes and look at this video. Here, this video explains in about 15 minutes the free energy principle. I don't expect you to fully understand everything that Carl Friston says, though. It's a difficult thing. On the other hand, it's simple in the sense that all he does say is that biological self-organization is governed by free energy minimization. If you have time, I advise you to also read this article. This is an article that basically comes from the Wired magazine. It's very readable. There are no equations in it, and it talks a bit about this theory. And I think it's a really fun read. That's about it. So then I'm going to leave it at this. And so please take down your questions, come with your questions to class, and then we'll talk about it. Bye.